Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, I'm Thomas Hubert, digital editor at the Irish Farmers Journal. Last weekend, I attended the beef finishing masterclass at Lisbeg Farms in Eyrecourt, County Galway, and one of the speakers was Charles Chavasse, a vet with the pharmaceutical company Zoetis. He went through the best practices when bringing new animals into a beef herd and how this was done there at Lisbeg Farms.
Ideally, all animals will be bought directly from the farm. We wouldn't go to the mart. Okay? Because if we do that, the animal's going to be less stressed, we've got less mixing of bacteria and all the rest of it. So that's the ideal. And it's not always possible to do it, and I appreciate that, but if we can, that's where we need to be going. Calm handling and having good facilities so that calm handling is possible is good for both man and beast. If fellas are beating cattle up and down, one, they're more likely to get injured themselves, but also the cattle are as well. But also, we're exciting them, we're stressing them. So when we then go and vaccinate them, our vaccines may not work. So we want calm handling facilities. We've had the arrival period I was talking about, that's so that animals calm down so they're ready for their immune system, their defence system to be turned on. They want the palatable low energy diet, we want them to start filling themselves up, and we need plenty of water going into them. That's to start off with, and then we'll step up the diet as they're on here. We want to give them, dose them and vaccinate them, and we want to be thinking about using something like risperdal IBR marker live into the muscle is what we're going to do for the IBR vaccination. But the RSV vaccinations, invariably they need 2 shots, okay? So you need to give them a shot on arrival and a second shot 3 to 4 weeks later, okay? We run them through the foot bath, and ideally we're going to turn them outside. I know you can't always do that, because if we're buying in November, we can't turn them out. But if you do have a chance of turning them out, they're going to basically calm down, okay? They're going to be out in the fresh air, and the vaccines are going to have a chance to work, because it takes a week, 10 days for vaccines to really kick in, so that when they come in, their defence system's all there, they're not stressed, they're used to each other. If you've used a long-acting worm or something like your Dectomax or your Sidectin, which persists, you don't have to dose them again. So you dose them on arrival, clean them out, turn them outside. Don't have to dose them when you bring them back in, as long as they're brought back in within 35 days. And ideally, once they are put into groups, don't keep chopping and changing the groups, okay? Because that unfortunately causes stress. So here at Lisbeg, they are buying from the mart, but they're trying to buy more and more directly. And that's something that's changed over the last sort of 7 or 8 years. So they've found the advantage in doing it, and that's what they're doing. They're developing a relationship with local suckler farmers. These are the arrival pens, so this is specifically for cattle that are arriving, but you've got the straw, you've got space, and okay, we need to do something about the roof, but we're getting there. They sometimes use an ivermectin injection, sometimes they use a pour-on for covering the worms. They're using risperdal IBR marker live for the IBR, and they're using 2 doses of the RSV vaccine, which they give on arrival and then a month later. They're running them through a foot bath as well. And even in the best run places, unfortunately, we will get animals we have to treat, and that's in fairness where James and his team come in, because they spot sick animals and treat them as quickly as possible. They're using a long-acting antibiotic for treating the pneumonias, along with a non-steroidal, an anti-inflammatory, okay? The advantage of using one of the long-actings is they don't have to keep handling the animals. So they basically will treat the animal, and then the thing is that's effectively treated for the next 10 days, 2 weeks. People used to feel, oh sure, if I'm using a long-acting, it must be slow-acting as well. That's not the case. Basically, these products will start working within about an hour. Okay, so it's not short-acting; it's working quickly, but it also is giving you the persistence. From a layman's perspective, cleaning the feet up, and then putting topical sprays on. And this is done actually in the pen. So basically, particularly if you've got mortal arrow, the antibiotics on the back of the heels is really important, okay? So you do that, and then also giving them a long-acting injection to cover any secondary infections.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Now, finishing healthy cattle is one thing, selling them is another. Joe Burke is in charge of the beef sector at Bord Bia, and I asked him for his views on the market this coming year and how farmers should prepare for it.
We have seen so far this year, even though last year was a good year, on average prices last year recovered by about 8%. So far this year we've seen a bit of an easing in prices, and on average cattle prices would be back about 10 cents a kilo on last year's levels in January 2015. You could say that, we have seen already that easing in prices. A lot of it is driven by what's happening outside in the markets. For example, in the UK market, on average cattle prices there in comparison to January 15 are back by about 30 pence a kilo. Ireland exports over half of our beef into the UK market, so that would be having a big impact on what's happening. Similarly as well, on the exchange rate side, unfortunately we've seen a strengthening in the euro, which has made us a little bit less competitive in terms of our exports into that market. Currently the euro is worth about 77 pence sterling, which compares to an average of about 72 pence sterling during 2015. So just that would be placing a bit of a difficulty on the trade at the moment. It has to be emphasised as well, cattle numbers have been strong. Recent weeks we've seen cattle slaughterings at 33,000 head, and that may have also had some pressure as well too on the market currently.
You're saying cattle numbers are strong here, and our market is mostly continental Europe and the UK. How is that market recovering? There's been years of crisis. Will there be the demand for all our beef?
I suppose overall we tend to focus more on our own supplies, but really it's what happens around Europe in the markets into which we're exporting our beef that is of greatest importance and greatest focus to us. Overall within Europe there's about 7 million tonnes of beef produced and consumed, and we will produce about 7 to 8% of that. So, we're not the beginning and end really of the beef market as far as everything is concerned around Europe. Overall, consumption rates are recovering, are improving steadily around Europe. We're still a long way behind maybe where consumption was before the economic recession around Europe. On average, consumption rates have fallen, and overall within Europe, consumption would still be maybe 300,000 tonnes less now than where it was in 2010, for example. That's having some impact. But also there are export markets now which have opened up also in addition to European markets, which could potentially be important. For example, the US market that opened up last year took about 2,000 tonnes of Irish beef. We are looking forward to the prospects now of being able to send Irish beef to China, hopefully before the end of the year. That's a huge market that would offer massive opportunities for us as well too, outside of Europe, and indeed live export opportunities as well too. We have a delegation visiting Ireland from Egypt next week. Indeed, the Egyptian market took an awful lot of Irish cattle in the past. Live exports represent a very important source of competition.
About China, there were inspectors in the last few days. Did you meet them? How did the visit go in terms of inspections, sanitary and veterinary requirements?
We did meet them. My colleagues as well too would have presented in relation to Ireland, our production systems and all of the unique selling points that Ireland has as a premium beef producer. My understanding is that they visited the meat plants and were very impressed as well too with the standards we have in terms of hygiene, in terms of food safety and traceability, and the production systems that we have. So a lot of what it comes down to is to iron out all of the different paperwork and bureaucracy dealing with Chinese government officials. It maybe sometimes takes a bit longer than what you expect it to take. They need to go back and report back to their, government bodies, their parent departments. I suppose that will take a period of weeks before they report back to Ireland. Hopefully come to a decision then regarding the specifications under which they'll import Irish beef.
Just to finish, you've mentioned the outlook for price, probably pressure from the currency exchange rate and the supply. What about the type? It's not all about price. There's also the specs and the type of beef that markets demand. What should Irish farmers know for the year coming of what's expected of them?
That's a very important point, all right, Thomas, and we have seen in recent months especially the price becoming impacted by specification issues. So it's vital for farmers to be aware of what the market is looking for. And in general, it's carcasses between 280 and 400 kilograms of carcass at a maximum. It's for animals with good conformation as well too, ideally of an O equals, of a minimum anyway. I suppose one of the restricting factors in terms of those heavier carcass weights, they produce very heavy steak cuts, which are very difficult to sell. They're too heavy for many of what our customers are looking for. So just to be aware of those things, because we are hearing of price penalties for animals that don't meet those conditions.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Now, you've heard Joe Burke mention exchange rates there and the strengthening of the euro against the sterling. This is all linked to a wider issue, the upcoming British referendum on EU membership and the prospect of a Brexit scenario. Northern Ireland Agriculture Minister Michelle O'Neill told our Northern Ireland editor, David Wright, about the risks this poses for agriculture in Ireland, north and south.
Well, certainly for me, being out and about and engaging with farmers and the wider agri-food community, people are seriously concerned about what the implications will be for them. Very clearly, we as a farming industry depend on the subsidy, so up to £300 million a year of subsidy that will be withdrawn in a post-Brexit situation. I think the uncertainties are so worrying for the farming community, because what will it mean for them post-Brexit? Will there be a subsidy in place? I think we can be very certain that the Tories aren't interested in replacing subsidy. It's not their position. They've very clearly said they want to move to a position where they would phase that out. Given the fact that our local farming industry, their income was made up 85% of that farm payment, that move would be significantly detrimental to the farming community. I think we would very quickly see farm businesses going out of business, and I think that the implications, the knock-on in terms of the price of food, all those things will have an impact on everybody in their individual lives. So for me, we need to have this debate. It's good that we have such an array of speakers here today, people who are actually pro and people who are against. And I think the fact that we can have that full and frank debate, it allows people then to be informed in terms of making a decision. I think clearly what we need to see is the people of the north need to have a say in terms of the referendum. They need to be able to place their vote and say what's right for them, because we are a very small island. We depend on an all-island trade, and I think that a post-Brexit situation would be, as I said, detrimental for the farming industry, and something that I'm going to be very strong in terms of articulating my voice on.
One issue a lot of farmers have put across is that they're very concerned about the level of bureaucracy from Europe, and I suppose it's one factor that I suspect many of them would think, let's get out of Europe and get away from all this bureaucracy. Maybe it's not as simple as that, because at the end of the day you still have to trade, and you still have to meet the requirements if you want to trade with Europe in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, we will have to still meet those requirements. As I always say, farmers are the natural custodians of the countryside. They're interested in looking after their land. They do look after the environment. No matter what situation we'd be in, we'd have to always have regulations around those things. I think that, is there a need for reform within Europe? Absolutely. Is there a need for simplification? Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've been successful in terms of trying to have some simplification around greening in the recent CAP negotiations, but we've a way to go, and I think that we're all up for challenging that, and that's our job. But I do still think that farmers are best, and the agri-food industry is best served within the European Union as opposed to outside of it.
And just finally, concerns around the all-island agri-food industry. Obviously a lot of trade north and south, and milk and sheep and beef, and certainly the concerns there about any sort of border controls, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. The traditional trade patterns which have existed for centuries are on the island, particularly if you look at the beef sector and how that trading pattern works. I think that obviously our Brexit situation would lead to that all being disrupted, and we're going to start having work controls, customs controls along the border. I mean, that in itself, where society come out of conflict, that in itself is detrimental, I think, in terms of mindsets and communities and dividing people. And I think that there are real concerns for the implications on this island in relation to trade, but also wider food.
Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Staying in Northern Ireland, figures released in the past few days show that farm incomes in the region have suffered a dramatic 41% fall in the past year. David Wright met Alan Irwin, a dairy farmer at the heart of this crisis.
Alan's a dairy farmer from outside Bamburgh in County Tyrone. Alan, maybe first of all, can you give me a wee bit of a background to your farming system and how many cows you're milking and what sort of system you have around your milk production?
Well, basically we're fourth generation dairy farmers here. We're running about 170 cows on a high input, high output basis. We like to think we're about as efficient as you can get in producing milk. We're producing about 2 million litres in the year and trying to improve things all the time. We've invested a lot of money for 3 or 4 generations in having a very highly efficient system, and now we're sort of paying the price for that.
And you have a son in the business as well, Alan? I
have my son in the business this last 4 or 5 years. Not a very positive outlook for him to stay in the business till basically work 100 hours a week or more and have no income for it actually costing the money to do it.
And over the last over the last 6 to 12 months, are you seeing the impact of the lower milk prices? Obviously, you are seeing the impact coming through in your business and in your figures.
Well, overall, in the last 7 or 8 months, up to 12 months, this farm would be losing somewhere in the region of £10,000 a month, which is totally unsustainable. We can't keep on doing that. That's just a fact of life. And if the milk price doesn't pick up, if our income doesn't improve, dairy farming here in this country will be finished.
And the outlook for certainly 2016, there's no great light at the end of the tunnel for the time being. Is there anything you can change, or anything you can do differently, or are you in a system you have to stick that system, or anything you can change in your system as you go forward?
No, there's not really very much we can change. If we start trying to cut our inputs as opposed to our overheads, cut meal in it, our cows will suffer. They'll not go in calf. We're hanging ourselves to the future anyway, so we really have to stay at what we're at. We can't make. Right, we can cut overheads. We can do without changing machinery or fixed machinery, which we're doing anyway. There's no money being spent within local businesses other than what has to be. So we have already cut to the minimum, and there's nowhere else we can go.
And in terms of the importance of the dairy industry to Northern Ireland, to the wider industry, obviously you'd see that as a well-known producer in the area. Businesses, other industries, other input suppliers all get hit.
Well, I don't think that the public generally realise just how dependent businesses are throughout the country on the dairy and business. If I can't afford to buy a new machine, the person that's selling me that machine is not doing well. The person that fixes it isn't doing well. There is a very big business built on the backs of dairy farming as such, and that's all coming to the wall. It may not be obvious yet, but it will tell its tale.
And anything in terms of politically wise, in terms of Stormont or even UK government that you think could be done differently, or things that could improve the lot of dairy farmers?
Well, I think overall, as far as government goes, I mean, the decisions taken with regard to Russia, etc., that the government aren't paying the price for. They're making us dairy farmers pay that price. So they would need to be stepping up and sorting it out. Really, as far as government goes, the UK is around about 60-65% self-sufficient in food. If there was a war which affected food imports, what the people of UK would be expected to do without food, which they can't do. And I think that a thing that is as important as food to a nation, it needs to be regulated and not just left to the open market, because if it's left to the open market at some stage, there'll be shortages.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
So, what about other sources of income? Energy generation is often presented as an alternative way of making money, and it was discussed at two conferences this past week, one on bioenergy and another one on solar power, where my colleague Odile Evans spoke with Michael Quirk, the chairman of Energy Cork.
Well, Energy Cork is the energy cluster in the Cork region. It's made up of small, large and medium-sized business, the academics of UCC and CIT, Marii, and then the public authorities of City and County Council.
Mm-hmm. And we've heard a number of presentations this morning already from developers. What are the opportunities for solar energy in Ireland?
Well, I suppose you've been here today and you see, the possibilities are endless really. From ground mounted to roof mounted for farmers in particular. It looks like the roof mounted option with a feed-in tariff is going to be very advantageous maybe in 12 to 18 months' time, depending on the attitude of the department. It's no secret that there's been an explosion in the dairying industry in Ireland in the last 3 or 4 years, and that the country's covered in what we would consider over-engineered cow sheds. So, they're perfect platforms for solar energy, and hopefully that opportunity will be availed of. And as regards the ground-mounted situation, there's already 1.7 gigawatts of connections gone into the ESB networks for ground-mounted projects, so it seems like farmers have been signing options with development companies. I've looked down through the list, I haven't seen too many individual farmers on that list, so I guess that ground-mounted revolution is about to happen as well.
There is a fee in terms of getting a grid connection. Is it feasible for roof-mounted solar farms to go down that route, or is it large enough that you'll get the returns from it?
Well, nobody knows, because we don't have a tariff and we don't know what the pricing structure will be, but so it's a kind of a wait and see thing at the moment. You wouldn't advise anybody to jump in yet unless they were large off-takers of power. If you saw Robert Goss today, he was discussed, was it O'Shea Farms or something of the country, where they were using as much power as they were producing. In a situation like that, that's economically viable. But if you're going to be in a situation where you're exporting a certain degree of your power, maybe 60-70% of it, you want to wait and see what the pricing is going to be. It'll all come down to the feed-in tariff.
Yeah, the Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Well, what would be nice from a farming perspective would be maybe planning exemption for a start, the ability to connect into 10-20 kV lines on the farm, low connection costs. Then we need to see maybe the removal of the Chinese tariffs into Europe, so the panels will become cheaper again, even though they've fallen by 80% over the last 3 years. And then we need to see the companies that are willing to do different deals. They're willing. In the UK, there's deals done based on, first of all, there's the option where the company will come along and lease the roof, put up the development themselves, and pay the farmer a lease. Then there's situations where the farmer will fund it and they'll put up the equipment and they'll avail of the revenue that comes from it. So because it's early starter and it's not going to happen for maybe 18 or 12 or 18 months, now's the time maybe to contact and find out what's available and what these rooftop developers want to see happen.
But then in terms of land-based mounted units, sort of concerns the farmers would have, in terms of taxing implications, and agricultural tax relief and that kind of thing, we need to see a commitment, I imagine, there as well, wouldn't we?
Well, yeah, I'm not a tax expert, but I think the tax situation as regards ground mounted leases is pretty unclear. There's people talking about maybe farmers over the age of 55 leasing the land, maybe able to avail of a tax-free status. I don't know, but that revenue haven't made any announcements on that yet. So, but at the end of the day, people have signed options, so they're going to be entering into some sort of a tax regime, whether it's taxed at 23 or 54% or zero. And it would be a big thing. If you get a situation that you're getting 25 grand for 25 years tax-free, then that's the equivalent of a very, very good pension. And it's a win-win situation for any farmer.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
The European scheme LEADER has funded hundreds of projects in rural Ireland over the years. Many organisations depending on it are now coming up for renewal, and their managers are worried about government interference in the scheme. Irish Country Living editor Mairead Lavery met one of them.
I'm here in the Parade Tower of Kilkenny Castle with Declan Rice, CEO of Kilkenny Leader Partnership. You're launching your report from 2007 to 2013.
Yeah, well, the programme only really finished at the end of last year. So yes, it's 300 odd projects, £13 million spend, and it's a landmark for us. And it's also, I suppose, as was taken the point out, that we are going to be making an application in the next couple of weeks for the new programme, which we are making in our own right as an independent local action group.
You were very anxious that community-led ethos is maintained.
Yeah, we are, because it's under threat. It can't be gainsaid that some of the policies and actions that have put local development companies, such as ourselves, independent local development companies, under pressure. And we have been pressurised, to toe the line on what government policy is. But it might be government policy, but it's not EU policy. And as far as we're concerned, it doesn't serve the communities and small businesses of Ireland best.
Has the EU supported the community-led programmes?
It has. As much as it can. And the EU's job isn't to big fights with national government, but it's made it quite clear it wants to see a fair process, and it's written to government, strongly, worded letters to say that they are in effect anxious that it would happen. And to be fair, it has some effect. Some of the initial indicators of what the rules would be if the new programme would have actually unfairly marginalised the independent local action groups.
But are the LCDCs, are they not still the preferred provider of the next programme?
They are, and of course we'd have issues with even that phraseology being used.
Yes.
Either it's an open, transparent and fair competition or it's not. If the government is running the competition, it shouldn't be making statements what's the preferred option. And also, what is the LCDC? I'm a member of the LCDC myself, but it has to be said it's closely aligned to the local authority.
Yeah.
And people don't hide from that. So is it a statutory body or is it a community organisation? It can't be both.
Okay, thank you very much, Declan. Good luck with the application.
Thanks very much, Mary.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, Irish Country Living's health correspondent Margaret Hawkins has an interview with a woman suffering from early onset dementia in this week's edition. She told consumer editor Ciara Leahy about the signs that can help you detect the disease and the consequences it can have on people's lives.
Actually, 4,000 people in Ireland have already been diagnosed with early onset dementia. And you're talking about people who are still in the workplace and still rearing families, have children in college. So the impact of it is quite huge, and it's something that all of us, I suppose, have to be aware of, that it can happen and does happen.
Margaret, you interviewed a lady called Helen Rochford-Brennan from Sligo, and she described the post-diagnosis period as being somewhat like a black tunnel. Can you tell me a bit more about what she meant by this?
Yes, she did describe it as like being in a black tunnel. She was a wonderful woman, and she was diagnosed with early onset dementia in 2012 at the age of 62. Only 62, and she was working or had retired early because she'd been feeling that bit sluggish and not herself, hugely involved in the corporate world and in advocacy for people with disabilities and so on. So she had huge talent, and it was a huge shock to be diagnosed. What she called it was the darkest period of unbelievable grief in her life, because even the word dementia summons up images that you don't really want to think about. You know, you never think about it hitting you at that stage of your life when you thought you were maybe at the peak of your cognitive ability, I suppose. But unfortunately, it does happen sometimes.
Margaret, you obviously can't underestimate the importance of support systems. So what exactly is out there for those with early onset dementia and their families? And are they good enough?
No, I'm afraid supports in this country are not good enough. The impact of it is huge on your life in terms of earning ability and the changes that it brings about within your home, within your house, your relationships and so on. So she was quite adamant that there weren't enough supports and that supports need to be fought for. The problem is going to increase. As I said, 4,000 people under 65 have it, and 48,000 people throughout Ireland have been diagnosed with dementia already. So the need is great, and the need will become greater. One of the other things she said was that the majority of people who have early onset dementia, they want to stay at home for as long as possible. And if that means somebody to accompany them, to enable them to have a good quality of life. But that just isn't there at the moment. So it's something that really has to be addressed.
Okay, that's very interesting. And often people with family members or people themselves that have dementia will say that in the early stages they saw little things that might be described as out of the ordinary before a diagnosis was made. So what are the key signs and symptoms that people should look out for?
Signs and symptoms can differ from person to person. My understanding from the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, that is the case. But in general, you're talking about things like forgetting things easily, repeating things frequently, trying to remember, being stuck for words, or one that a lot of people will probably notice, that someone loses track in a conversation, or if they're in a new place they find it confusing, or a new situation. And the other thing is, say a person may have been really good at making decisions, but suddenly there's all sorts of uncertainty and not able to make a decision. There's the other thing of losing interest in people and in activities, or not seeming to care as much. And all those things may bring up kind of low mood and anxiety. As I say, progress does vary from person to person.
Finally, Margaret, if listeners think that this is an issue that affects them or a member of their family, where can they go to for help?
Well, in terms of help, the first port of call has to be your GP. Either approach her or him and just say how you're feeling and what you're worried about. There is a standard test that a doctor will do. It'll involve words, remembering something that's said a few minutes later. And if your GP has concerns after that test is done, he or she will refer you to a consultant, and it would only be at that stage that a proper diagnosis would be done. They can ring the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, whether it's an individual worried about yourself or whether it's a family worried about somebody. You can have a chat with somebody at the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland's helpline, and that's 1800 341 341. Do look for help, and you can read more about it and about Helen's story in this week's Irish Country Living.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.